Look at this. Can you see the squirrel? Like he thinks he's King Squirrel. Oh my goodness. Of course he thinks he's King Squirrel. Look at all those other squirrels. It's nuts out here. Let's see what I deal with. Yes. All right, let's get back to American Miscellany. I'm very excited about this book. The last essay, essay number 64, was about Lycurgus, a Spartan fellow who basically led the Spartans in a revolution against the oppressive ruling class of very, very wealthy people. This small group of wealthy people was impoverishing and enslaving most of the population, and basically they had a revolution, changed things, and created somewhat of a utopia. Hopefully that video will be a nice little how-to video for someone someday. But let's move on. Who knows which of these essays might hold little gems of wisdom like that? Who knows? So we're going through one by one. This book was published in 1865, 160 years ago. There's a lot of interesting things in here in a very random order. And today we're looking at essay number 65, The Nests of Fishes. Should be interesting. Who knows whether or not it'll be revolutionary? At least we'll learn something. All right. We're here on page 148 of American Miscellany, essay number 65, The Nests of Fishes. Almost all the higher classes of animals assiduously perform the duties of parents to their young. They nurse and feed and protect them till they are able to provide for themselves. But many of the inferior animals, on the other hand, never know or care for their offspring. Not a few of them, indeed, as the insect tribe, bestow great pains in constructing nests for the eggs of their future young, and even provide and store up the food necessary for them. But here all their solicitude ends, and in many instances the parents are dead before their young come into existence. Aquatic animals exhibit what on a casual view would appear great carelessness in this respect. Fish deposit their spawn almost at random, and leave their ova to be hatched by the elements and their young to provide for themselves. They form no nest, or a very rude one. The sand of the seashore, the small pebbles of the river or lake, or leaves of plants or seaweeds receive their minute eggs. These are hurriedly and rudely covered up, if deposited in furrows of the sand, or they adhere to stones or weeds by means of a gluey mucilage by which they are enveloped. When the young fry are developed, they associate together in shoals and roam about amid the shallow waters, untended and unprotected by the larger fish, nay, sometimes even preyed upon by their own progenitors. This we might be apt to think extreme of, sorry, little knocks it out, of course. This we might be apt to think extreme indifference and an outrage on the great law of paternal endearment, but a little reflection will show that it is a wise adjustment of nature. In such an unstable element as water, continually agitated by currents and incessantly changing its place, it would have been impossible for a parent fish to have kept its young family around it, or even if it could have afforded them any protection. Think, too, of a codfish surrounded by several millions of its young, the offspring of one single season, or of an immense shoal of herrings, with each parent taking charge of its 2 or 3 millions of young and distinguishing each among the surrounding myriads. The salmon comes into freshwater rivers to deposit its spawn high up in the stream, but its nature requires that it should return to the ocean again long before its young are able to travel. And the same remark applies to many migratory fishes, which leave the deep waters, their usual haunt, and come for a short space to the shallow water to spawn. Yet fishes, obedient to the great law of nature, show much solicitude about selecting the proper place for their spawn and future young. Every year the herring in countless shoals makes a long journey, it is supposed from the deep seas to the shallow bays and inlets, and the salmon leaves the sea, trails up the current of the river with incredible perseverance and force, overleaping the falls and rapids till it gains the smooth and shallow source, where amid the sand the spawn is deposited, and where the future young may sport in safety amid the sunny rills, till they gain sufficient strength to swim down the stream. Some fishes, however, really make a kind of nest in the water, and assiduously tend their ova till they are hatched. This is the case with the stickleback, which constructs a nest made of pieces of grass and straw, fixed among the pebbles of the stream which they inhabit. Monsieur Costi procured some of these fishes, and putting them into basins filled with water and the proper materials of their nests, watched their progress, a minute and very curious detail of which he lately submitted to the Academy of Sciences at Paris. The sticklebacks, having selected a proper spot, set about constructing their nests. I saw, says he, each of the males that were engaged in this work heap up in the place the selected pieces of grass of every kind, which he often brought from a great distance, seizing them with his mouth, and of these he began to form a kind of carpet. But as the materials which form the first part of his edifice might be carried away by the movements or oscillations of the water, he had the precaution to bring some sand, with which he filled his mouth and deposited it on the nest in order to keep it in its place. Then, in order to make all the substances thus brought together adhere to each other, he pressed his body against them, sliding slowly, as if by a kind of vibratory creeping, and in this way glued them together by means of the mucus which exudes from his skin. By this operation, the first collected materials form a kind of foundation or solid floor on which the rest of the edifice is to be reared. The execution of this he continues with a feverish perseverance and agitation. In order to satisfy himself that all the parts are sufficiently united, he agitates his pectoral fins with great rapidity, in such a manner as to produce currents directed against the nest, and if he notices that the pieces of grass are moved, he presses them down with his snout, heaps sand upon them, flattens them, and glues them together again. When the process has reached this point, he chooses more solid materials. He seizes small pieces of wood or straws in his mouth and presses them into the thick places or on the surface of the first construction. If he finds, when attempting to introduce them, that the position does not sufficiently answer the purpose, he draws them out again, seizing them at another part, and again inserts them, and pushes them forward until he ascertains that he has made the best possible use of them. Occasionally, however, in spite of all of his care, there are portions which, owing to their shape, will not conform to the general plan. These he draws out, carries to a distance, and abandons, and proceeds to select others. When he has succeeded in building the floor and side walls, he then undertakes the roof, which is constructed of the same materials, carefully glued and compacted together by the same vibratory pressure of his body. Meanwhile, he takes care to secure an opening in the center of the nest by repeatedly thrusting in his head and the greater part of his body. The nest being thus finished, the male, which is distinguished by his vivid coloring, darts out and invites a female to deposit her eggs in the place which he has just prepared for their reception. The female enters, and having deposited her ova in that cavity, darts out at the opposite side at which she entered, and thus it makes an open passage through both sides of the nest. Several females in succession are thus invited to deposit their spawn, and thus the nest becomes a rich magazine of ova. The male now becomes the sole guardian of this deposit, for not only do the females take no care of it, but they become its formidable enemies, forming part of those numerous coalitions which attempt to plunder it and satisfy their voracious appetite by devouring the ova. In his defensive exertions, no obstacle can divert him or daunt his courage during the whole month requisite for the development of the ova. In order to strengthen the nest, he now covers it with stones, the size of which is sometimes equal to half his body, and which he moves along with great labor. In this process, he always reserves one or more openings, through which he often drives currents of water. By the rapid motions of his fins, these currents seem to be necessary in clearing away objects from the eggs, for if not thus cleansed, they are found all to perish. It is wonderful to see with what courage he beats away excessive numbers of his foes, striking them with his snout, erecting his long, sharp spines. Sometimes, when about to be overpowered with numbers, he resorts to stratagem and darts suddenly out of his nest, as if in pursuit of some prey. This frequently deceives the attacking sticklebacks, and they rush after him in hopes of sharing the prey, and thus they are decoyed from the nest. As the period of hatching draws to a close, his assiduity increases. He removes the stones to give more easy access to the water, enlarges the openings, increases the frequency of the currents, and moves the eggs nearer the surface or carries them deeper according as circumstances require. Finally, when the eggs are hatched, he still continues to watch over the young in his nest and does not allow them to go at liberty till they have become sufficiently active to provide the means of their own preservation.